Today, following the great reception to my Far Cry tier list video, I'm doing another tier list video for Ubisoft's other popular franchise, Assassin's Creed. Now, before we begin, I want to preface this by saying that I actually really enjoy the RPG Assassin's Creed and the regular Assassin's Creed, like the stealth, action-adventure series. So I'll be ranking both sides of the series equally, as I love games from both sides. Plus, I'll be, like last time, factoring in the community's opinion, my own opinion, and the critical reception for the game for the absolute best overall rating on the tier list. Also, this will be a little bit faster paced just due to the amount of games I have to get through today. There's much more Assassin's Creed than Far Cry's. So let's begin in chronological order with the one that started it all. Assassin's Creed launched in November of 2007 for the Xbox 360, PS3 and PC. The game that was set in the Third Crusade in the Holy Land followed Desmond Miles in the present day, reliving the memories of his ancestor Altair. The main protagonist of the game was basically Altair, who was unleashed upon an open world with Masyaf, Jerusalem, Acre, I think is how you say it, and Damascus. Following a mostly stealthy approach to gameplay with a very kind of weak combat. Critically though, it sits around 80 on Metacritic, with the biggest complaints going towards the really horrible mission structure, just they were very repetitive. But me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the mission structure, and the setting to me wasn't interesting, so you can get it, I don't like the mission structure, and the setting, the Third Crusade, just wasn't interesting to me. It's just not something I'm too interested in. But community-wise, I don't think I'm too alone in that, as a lot of people do seem to agree with me that the mission structure just wasn't very good, but they do like it. So, with that factored in, I believe the game belongs in a B tier, due to its gameplay being very repetitive, but it does deserve a lot of credits for beginning the entire franchise, if you know what I mean. The second entry for the series launched in 2009 for consoles and 2010 for PC. Following a new assassin, Ezio, it easily, narrative-wise, took a massive step up for the franchise, having one of the most engaging narratives in the series. Gameplay was much better, but personally, it still wasn't great. Combat was much greater though, with swordplay being more fun and exciting, but still weak and a little bit just not a lot of, not challenge, but just there wasn't much to it. It was very basic. Italy, though, was a fantastic setting, with beautiful sights and lots to explore. My favourite just being Venice. It was amazing going down those canals. Critically, it sits around the 90s, and the community does share this opinion mostly. Me, though, I don't actually like 2 that much compared to the sequel. Potentially due to me playing Assassin's Creed 2 many years after it launched. I only played Assassin's Creed 2 after I finished Revelations, so we're talking about 2-3 years later, so it's understandable that I may not have enjoyed it as much. But I'm still going to be putting in the A tier just due to how much it did innovate. Launching in November of 2010, the returning protagonist Ezio really shines here in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which is straight up a much better and improved version of 2, and I'm glad I gave it a shot, because Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is one of the best in the entire series, improving every single aspect from story to gameplay to just genuinely everything. So, critically though, it sits around that 90 range once again, and community share the exact same feelings that the game's incredible, and I share it too. The game is phenomenal. So with that said, this has to be our very first S tier. In November of 2011, the finale to the Ezio trilogy launched to a lesser reception compared to its previous entries. With a lack of innovation in the gameplay other than a hook blade, there was little change in this entry. But narrative-wise, it did weave Altair and Ezio's story together and gave us one of the best intros to a game ever. And by the way, please watch that cinematic opening, that cinematic CGI cutscene, please watch it, it's honestly incredible. Critically, it sits around the 80s on Metacritic. Community seemed to share the exact same sentiment that it changed little, but still was a good game. Personally, I like this entry, and dare I say, even love the entry, but I do recognise the shortcomings, and I'm placing it in the B tier due to its lack of gameplay innovations and story innovations. In October of 2012, the story of Desmond Miles would come to an end, with the new protagonist of Connor Kenway taking the role from Ezio, and it would also spark the beginning of the Kenway saga. Set during the American Revolution in the 1700s, Connor, a Native American, fights back and aims to kill the man who murdered his people, with characters like George Washington appearing throughout the story. Gameplay-wise, it was controversial to say the least, moving to a much easier combat system, with it now being animation-based, meaning you can kill enemies with 2 buttons by pressing B to counter and X to kill. Graphically, it was also a massive step up, though with an engine upgrade coming, the game looked incredible. Critically though, it sits around the mid-80s, and this one is truly a mixed bag with the community, with some liking and loving it, and some hating it. Personally, I love it though. It truly was my very first Assassin's Creed, as I played the earlier ones, and I did like it, but this was the one that really made me love the series. And no, it's not as strong as the other entries, and I recognise that, but it's still a good damn game. So I think it belongs in the A tier. In October of 2013, the best game in the series launched worldwide. I'm not gonna hide it though. This is my favourite Assassin's Creed game of all time. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, and you can guess where I'm putting it. But let's look at the gameplay, and what it changed. Gameplay wise, it does use the Assassin's Creed 3 combat system, being animation based and very easy. But it can be seen as a downfall, but the rest of the gameplay rises with the naval system being introduced, allowing you to pilot your own boat and go pirating around. And to be fair, it's the best naval system in any pirate game to date. Ubisoft genuinely, accidentally made the very best pirate game ever made. That's kind of insane. Narrative-wise, it does continue the Kenway saga, and the conclusion to the Kenway saga, as there was no more games with a Kenway protagonist, as Edward Kenway's story was incredible to say the very least. Critically, it sits around the mid to high 80s, and the community are with me on this one, with most of the community seeming to love it. So without a doubt in my mind, this game is an S tier. In E3 of 2014, Ubisoft announced not one but 2 Assassin's Creeds, Rogue and Unity. The latter we'll return to in a second. But Rogue was interesting, as it was being developed by Ubisoft Sofia, and Rogue was their very first ever Assassin's Creed. It was being released exclusively on the Xbox 360 and PS3, not released on the Xbox One or PS4, which is quite interesting in my opinion. But Rogue was interesting because, in a way, it very much was a standalone expansion for Assassin's Creed 4, as it used almost the exact same systems and hell, even the same animations to a degree. But for a full-price game at $60 at launch, it's inexcusable to reuse assets, and it definitely drags the game down because it's basically a $60 expansion. But its story was truly unique, as you'd be allowed to play as a Templar for the first time in the series, and it featured an assassin turning to the Templars, which we've never ever seen explored before. However, I have a major gripe with the story, and that is, well, it's a typical Assassin's Creed story. Instead of the assassins being the good guys and the Templars being the bad guys, they just flipped it. The Templars are the good guys saving the world, and the assassins are the bad guys destroying the world. If Ubisoft Sofia genuinely did actually commit to our protagonist being a bad guy, I think this could have been one of the best games in the series. But they didn't, and I think they really should have committed and tried a bit harder to make a story about trying to make a villain, playing as a villain for once. I think that could have been really good. Critically though, it sits around the low 70 mark for all the platforms it released on, and the community does seem mixed on it as well, with some sharing the same feelings as me and not really enjoying the story and kind of, being a bit overpriced for what it was at launch, but to be fair, some did really enjoy the game. It's a tough one though, but I'm going to place it in the B tier. Releasing on the same day as Rogue, only for the Xbox One, PS4 and PC, this one is an infamous title, for the very wrong reasons. Unity on launch day is a technical disaster, and is something that cannot be excused. The game was a complete, and still is, an utter mess of bugs and glitches that happened every single time you turned a corner. Story-wise, Unity doesn't improve, and I personally don't like the story at all. It's basically a love story between Arno, an assassin, and Elise, a Templar. I was bored halfway through, and I genuinely had to force myself to continue playing through the story. But I will say Paris was a phenomenal setting. I loved exploring Paris, the alleyways, all the houses you could go into. It was incredible. And the parkour system had the best animations and some of the best systems in any Assassin's Creed game to this day. It's a joy to watch the parkour, and the combat was a major step up. The combat was really good, it was fluid, it was a bit challenging, but it wasn't incredible. It was still just really good though, an improvement. Critically though, once again, is sitting around the low 70s, and community-wise is interesting, to say the least. Recently, in the past couple of years, we've seen a massive outpour of love for Unity. The community does seem to really like the game now, however, previous to this, the community didn't like it at all. So the community seems mixed. It used to be negative, but now it seems loved, so I'm not sure. Personally though, I did like the gameplay, the world and parkour. However, the technical disaster and the lackluster story and a mixed community opinion unfortunately has to put this in the C tier. I would say this one's either a B or C though, and I know some will say that it's a B tier, an A tier, but I think personally it has to be a C tier for its absolute technical disaster. In October of 2015, a return for the franchise was said to happen through Assassin's Creed Syndicate, a game set in Victorian London. And to say the least, it was not a return. The game isn't great, straight up. It's once again another lackluster Assassin's Creed game, but it did launch in a good technical state for once, compared to Unity, with once again another lackluster story and gameplay that was just a step back from the one featured in Unity, as the gameplay, instead of being this quite really cool system introduced in Unity with counters and really flashy animations, was more just button spamming. World-wise though, I didn't enjoy London, because the majority of the game, they wanted you to use a zipline launcher. And I just feel like if you're going to commit to this London setting, I just don't think a zipline launcher made sense. Like, I get it's hard to traverse London anyway, but the zipline launcher I think that took something away from exploring London. Critically though, it sits around the mid-70s, which is pretty decent. And the community-wise does seem to be pretty negative around this one. Some do like it, I'm not going to say that no one likes it, but some people do like it. It's safe to say though, the community, from what I've seen on YouTube and Reddit, they don't really seem to like Syndicate very much. Me though, I don't like this entry. I've really tried my absolute best to like Syndicate, but I just can't. It's fine if you do, but it's just not a game I like. So this one is a C tier. After a year break for the series, it returned incredibly strong with its best entry in years for Assassin's Creed Origins in October of 2017. Set in Egypt following Bayek's story for revenge and the founding of the Assassin Order. The gameplay was phenomenal, transitioning the game to an RPG, which was in my opinion a fantastic idea and made Origins an incredible game with such an incredible mix-up to the formula. Story-wise, finally after a couple lackluster stories since 4, finally, it came with Origins, one of the best stories, and maybe even the best story in the entire franchise. It was a phenomenal story, and if you have not played it, please at least look at the story. It is incredible. The world was great as well. It was super interactive and lived in through tons of side quests and interactions. One of my favourites is taking your arrow and your bow and arrow and putting in a fire pit, and the arrow would actually light on fire. That was such a cool thing to do, and actually gave you a quick, good combat advantage. Critically, it sits around the low to middle 80s, and the community also seemed to agree that Origins is an incredible game. There is some negativity, it's not everyone liked the RPG formula, but I really liked it, and it seems a lot of the community does seem to also like Origins. Personally, I do love Origins, and I think it's an incredible game deserving its place in the S tier. Maybe a little high for the entry, and I may be a little bit biased due to me going on a pretty long negative streak of not liking Rogue, Unity or Syndicate, but I think it belongs in the S tier. You may disagree. Now we enter the most controversial side of the series. Released in October of 2018, this entry transported users to ancient Greece. Assassin's Creed Odyssey followed the story of the war between Athens and Sparta, with you allowing to choose your main character between two choices of gender, with Kassandra being the female option and Alexios the male option, and your journey to destroy the cult of Cosmos, as for the first time in the series, Assassins and Templars did not feature in the series until the very first DLC. Gameplay, it went even more RPG than ever, with hundreds of armor sets and weapons that can be found and even bought through in real life for a real life store using real life currency. It also had a massive, and I mean massive, 99 level caps. You could go for 99 levels, there's tons of abilities and skills, and it introduced a lot of grinding and abilities that you could use. The abilities were really powerful, especially some of them in later ones. In the Fate of Atlantis DLC, some of the abilities were very, not grounded, they were very superhero-esque, to be honest. But to be fair, the game, to say the least, I think was incredible. This game was divisive though. I'd say you either love Odyssey or you absolutely hate it. There's really no in between. And it's easy to say the community is very mixed about it. Critically though, the game sits around the middle to high 80s. Personally, I loved Odyssey, and it was such an incredible game, and to this day I loved every single hour of the 150 hours I put into the game. I played through the game on played through the game, and then I played through the game again on New Game Plus as I played Alexios and I played Kassandra. And I've got to admit, out of all that time I spent on the game, I loved it. Both the game and all of its deals, and the Fate of Atlantis is incredible. Legacy First Blade isn't very good, but But I have to factor in Odyssey's rating with the community's very mixed reception, and I have to bring the game down to an A tier. I would put it in S, I really would, but I understand some people may just disagree that it doesn't belong in A tier, it belongs in the F tier. I don't think we even have one of those, but personally I did love it, and so did the critics. Finally, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the most recent entry releasing on November 10th of 2020 for the current generations of consoles and the next generation of consoles, follows the story of Eivor and the Viking invasion of England and its massive open worlds of England, Norway, Asgard, America, and through DLC, Ireland and France. A massive game with tons to explore, to say the least. Gameplay, it didn't change too much, and in some opinions, such as mine, it was a downgrade from Odyssey, with the abilities for combat truly, I just think, being unimpressive and feeling useless, except for a few, as the abilities in Odyssey were grand, had tons of flashy animations and cool things, and yes, weren't too grounded, but they were fun, and in Valhalla, I basically just used the grappling hook ability. There's nothing else to use, really. I also have to mention that I didn't really like the new wealth system of the game. This was a major negative for me, as you basically, whenever you wanted a new armor set or weapon or ingot to upgrade your gear, you had to go through a locked door or a blocked door, do like a little mini puzzle every single time, and that was really, really annoying. I didn't like it. The new DLC, Wrath the Druids, did fix this a little bit, to say the least. It's not as bad there. Story-wise, I didn't enjoy the middle section of the game. I think Assassin's Creed Valhalla shines. Its opening is phenomenal, I loved it. And the ending parts were also incredible and really well done, but the middle section of conquering England wasn't really done well. I felt it was drawn out and really long. Critically, it sits around the low to mid 80s once again, and the community, like with Odyssey, is quite mixed, as some would want to return to the standard action-adventure stealth Assassin's Creed, and some want a continuation of the RPG Creed, leaving it very mixed. Personally, I do like Valhalla a lot, as I liked it enough to, go buy the Season Pass. I bought it last month, and I quite enjoyed the DLC I played. But it's just simply not as strong as Origins or Odyssey in my opinion. So I've got to put it in the B tier. And that's our list. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tier list. I think it was a little bit longer, I think, so far than the Far Cry video, but thank you so much for watching. I might do more of these tier lists, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching.